is a part of Smooth Breakfast here on Smooth 98.1. In the studio with us, well, before I introduce the analysts, we have, of course, Kylie Baker.
Good morning.
And we have Ayo, Myro
Good
Esse.
morning.
Good morning. And my name is Valentine, Lagos. Thank you very much for joining us. Our wonderful analysts are ready to go through the stories with us. This morning, we have Devo Kore this morning. Good morning, Devo.
Good morning, Lagos.
You can catch him on socials at Devo, that's his handle.
Cool
Adedumade.
27,000.
Ah, all right.
I was waiting for that.
I know. Same here.
Good morning, Lagos.
Good
Nice
morning,
to be here.
Adedumade. His handle is the same name at Adedumade as well. And we have, not forgetting, Bolaho. Good morning, Bolaho.
Good morning, Valentine, and good morning, Lagos.
Bolaho's social media handle is at Mr. G Quest. All right, Lagos, as we jump into the stories, here's how to get across to us and send in your messages.
You can reach us on WhatsApp 0809 444 0981. That's 0809 444 0981.
Our first set of stories, the first comes from Punch newspaper. NLC rejects 27,000 naira minimum wage. So we saw the news, most of us saw the news on the socials and different platforms. The talk is still going on. The Nigeria Labour Congress has rejected the amount that's been fixed and agreed upon by the National Council of State on Tuesday at 27,000 naira minimum wage, which is the benchmark at the barest minimum that even the public and private firms should pay the lowest level of workers. But taking us through the story, what are the implications of this, and why do you think the NLC is kicking back at the price, the amount, really?
Well, I mean, finally we've come to a headstand at this present moment now, where the government has finally come to a conclusion on how much is going to be paid. We're talking 27,000 now. We know where they started from anyway. Initially, the governors were saying that they could only afford to pay 22,500 as the minimum wage or so. And this has actually gone through a long, lengthy process. Of course, it started from the tripartite committee that was set up to look into the matter. After that, that went through the Federal Executive Council as well too. From the Federal Executive Council went on to the National Executive Council, which constitutes the governors or so. And the main issue here is the affordability anyway by the National Executive Council, I mean the governors anyway, and they have actually been the main burden of this issue. All along anyway, federal government has said that, look, we can afford to pay this wage, but can the states also afford to pay the wage? And when we look at the system, currently at the moment now, there's only about 27 states are unable to meet their basic salary payment to their workers. We're talking, I mean, federal government has had to bail them out several times through the Paris Club Fund or so. So eventually, anyway, the national, all this process eventually went through the National Council of States, which is made up of the president, the vice president, and former heads of state. Also, we also have the Senate president and also the Speaker of the House as well too, and also Attorney Generals of the country as well, former Attorney Generals. Eventually, this has gone through several phases. Everybody's looked into it, and they've finally come to a conclusion that 27,000 seems ideal. When I look at this situation on ground, I think, at least in my own opinion, the government has been they have shifted ground. I mean, we've been talking from 22,500. They've shifted grounds, and we're looking at 18,000 initially. So that is actually a 50% increase. Now, when we look at the situation as well, is 27,000 ideal? Of course, that's debatable. When we look at the global standards, we look at even in Africa as well too. We're talking about 27,000. If you convert that dollar terms, is that ideal? Probably not ideal. But when we're talking about what the states can afford, because the issue now is about affordability, I think, the NLC should actually shift ground a bit.
Yes, but then again, the states, if the states are complaining that they cannot afford to pay the workers those salaries or that benchmark, can they afford to pay themselves? I mean, the top executives in those states, can they afford to pay themselves the exorbitant salaries that they receive? And that's one point that you should examine. The second point that I need to ask you again is, why do you think the NLC is was so headstrong at standing their ground and demanding for 30,000 naira? That's seen that it has gone through the tripartite committee, the National Economic Council, the Executive Council, and now being passed to the National Assembly. Do you think that they feel left out, that they have been involved in the negotiating process in the
They,
end?
they have been involved in the negotiating process, and I think what they're holding on to now is that they believe that yes, they were involved in the tripartite committee that came up with the conclusion that 30,000 should be the minimum wage. So they were actually consulted and they were involved in this. But their own gripe is that look, the tripartite committee is agreed to a 30,000, and as such, that should be what the government should pay. But that is only just a suggestion anyway. It's a suggestion. So you cannot tell me now that of course the government that is going to pay would not be involved in deciding how much they would end up paying. So that's where the bane of the problem is at the moment now. And when you're talking about why they are so headstrong on the 30,000, of course it's understandable as well. So when you look at the lifestyles of our governors, the lifestyles of the president as well too. I hope that this would actually bring about conversations about scaling down the size of government and people living within their means as well.
So everybody feels the pain.
Mark my words today, government will not deliver on this because they don't have the funds, both at the federal level and at the state level. Unfortunately, the same situation ASU found themselves in with an agreement with government which they could not deliver. It will repeat itself in this NLC case. Mark my words and see.
But Devon, when you say they should mark your words, how about states that can actually afford it?
There are
So
few-
if you look
there are
at
few
states like
states.
Lagos State, people have argued that should it be that certain states who can actually afford this should benchmark their minimum wage and not the same across board, because it seems unfair, particularly because if you look at the standard of living in Lagos State, it's definitely higher comparably with other states. So
Well, the interpretation of minimum wage is that it is the minimum. It is not the set exact. Lagos states can pay higher than the minimum, but some states should not go below what has been agreed.
Yeah, so that's thank you very much for emphasizing that. That's minimum level one, step one. But then again, it's an ongoing conversation, and we'll see where it leads us. There's another part of the story that you failed to touch, Bola, but that's besides this primary focus, but other bit of news that raised an alarm over the reactions from Obasanjo's comments to the president. But anyway, that's some news that we've touched before. But let's move on very quickly. Lagos, be reminded of the fact that you can send in your messages through WhatsApp to 0809 444 0981. And if you're traveling out of the state, you can also listen to us by downloading the app. Go to the App Store, Google Play Store, the Apple App Store. It's Smooth 98.1 FM Lagos. Now, the next story is from Premium Times. Nigeria declares Lassa fever outbreak, activates emergency response. And this is coming from the Nigerian Center for Disease Control. They made this announcement on the heels of the International Lassa Fever International Conference held in Abuja to mark the 50th anniversary of the discovery of the disease in the country. They said that since the beginning of this year, they've recorded over 60 cases so far, and we know that Lassa fever is an acute viral hemorrhagic illness transmitted to humans through contact with food and household items contaminated with infected rodents. Take us through this story, Ivo.
Yes, this is one of the things you don't want to be facing with the new year, but this is an outbreak that has been declared, and you can imagine we've been dealing with it for the past 50 years. That's almost older than Nigeria. Now, Lassa, unlike Ebola, if you remember the Ebola scare, doesn't deteriorate as quickly as Ebola, which is almost an immediate within 48 hours, it becomes fatal. But Lassa fever takes a little while, and maybe that's the reason why it hasn't been given the attention that it should. Now, the NCDC, that's the National Center of Disease and Control, in conjunction with WHO, the Federal Ministry of Federal Ministry of Environment, and the U.S. Center of Disease and Control have come together to facilitate some emergency phase to address this, which is by sending out what they call rapid response teams to the various locations that are affected. Now, many of the states that are affected fall into some of the arid states like Edo, Ondo, Ebonyi, Bauchi, Nasarawa, Taraba, Oshun, even Abuja itself, Kaduna, Abia, and it's more it's more shown during the dry season, obviously.
Yes.
And what they've said in these areas that they'll be looking at campaigns to make people aware to how to treat it, how to address it. That the improvement of the diagnosis of Lassa fever has improved in terms of labs within the country. However, the two areas which they've said would address the issue, because Lassa fever, the main vector is rats, is proper hygiene and environmental sanitation. Now, if we break this down a bit, washing of hands, storage of foods. Nigerians, to a large extent, still have storage issues, especially in some of these states.
Yes.
And when you put rice or beans in some of these bags and they're not properly stored,
And they're exposed.
they're exposed. Rats begin to, especially a lot in the market areas, when what do you call it? Farmers are moving their goods, even in villages, even in the metropolitan areas. I'm shocked that Lagos, with its huge sanitation problem, is not on the list. But I think that's not to give us a pat on the back, not to address our waste management issues, and that's where it speaks of the environmental sanitation issue.
And it should be highlighted because, for a fact, we know it in our faces, right? Every day, if you're driving through a cold bridge, you would not, you will not miss the sight. It's very disturbing. Not sometimes.
It's everywhere.
It's very disturbing. You see open defecation going on every time,
Of
and we know
course.
that in some of these damp areas, that's where the rodents come
Right.
from, and they go into the residents, and it's unavoidable. But yes, that's buttressing your point.
Yeah,
though.
so the environmental sanitation issue now eats the cake, and that's where around the country. If you remember how Ebola was transferred, someone flew into the country and
landed in Lagos.
landed in Lagos. So let's bring this back home. Someone can move from one of the affected states and just land in Lagos, where you have a higher population, and we expect it to spread much faster. I think there have been campaigns of killing rats before now, or how many rats you could catch, etc. But I think now in this emergency state, it needs to be stepped up, and to some extent, we would bring it down to a logical point of control.
Thank you very much, Debo, for that. Let's move on to Punch newspaper for the story. Federal Road Safety Commission has issued a traffic alert as federal government resumes work on the Lagos-Ibadan-Kano-Kaduna expressways, and that's from the Punch. Adigmade, take us through this, please.
First of all, I'd like to commend the FRSC for doing a good job of warning us ahead of time. However, secondly, I find it quite interesting that a road that took us 2 years to build is taking us almost 1,000 years just to repair. Because, and I'm talking about the Lagos-Ibadan road particularly. Now construction started on this road sometime in 2013, and before then we know all the history that the road has been through, especially in regard to the concessions and the stories of paucity of funds that have come over the years. Now, what is quite surprising now again is the government stated sometime last year that the road is going to be completed in 2019, by December 2019. But Julius Berger is now saying that it's going to be completed in 2021. So I'm wondering what exactly we should look forward to 2019 or 2021. I find it funny that the deadline keeps increasing, keeps extending year in, year out. And we also must not forget that the federal government has increased its road infrastructure budget to the 2019 budget from 500 billion to 600 billion. So I believe that at least the Lagos-Ibadan road should be completed in such a short time. Now, with regards to other roads in the country, I also commend the government, at least this government, for trying to ensure that the projects are completed. But it is not just trying to ensure. We want to see a completion. That we are always here talking about it's being completed, when will we ever say it has been completed?
Good question, Adigmade. Thank you very much for that. Let's
And
take one messages.
we have some comments with regards to the minimum wage as expected. Woma Chidoze here says, good morning guys, I think the government has no plan of increasing the minimum wage. What I think is the plan is just to throw a value at the NLC, knowing full well it would be rejected. This will start of another process which might take them to the 2019 election. Of course, we all know that after the election, everything would die a natural death. Some have, I have another comment here. Opemi says, the wage disparity between the civil servants and the senators is huge. What is even 30k? The money that is not even enough to buy food for their dogs. Meanwhile, we go to the same market to buy the same fuel, shaking my head.
Let's move on to this next story.
Alright, the next story here. Nigerian Air Force redeploys 27 air marshals, 45 senior officers. This is from The Punch. And we have the full story here. The Police Service Commission, PSC, has confirmed that commissioners of police across the state will be swapped for the purposes of next month's general election.
And that's another story, but take us through the first one, the Nigeria Air Force story, Devo, please.
Well, it's just more or less a bulletin of the current promotions going on within the Nigerian Air Force. That's about 27 air marshals and 45 senior officers, and they've literally broke down all the candidates, those who were promoted to the various positions, those who have taken up new positions,
Yes.
and we'd like to congratulate them for that.
Mhm.
You know, the military is regimented, and a promotion comes with serious acknowledgement and recognition. We'd also like to seize the opportunity to thank our brothers at arms who fight on behalf of the sovereignty of this country externally, and at the same time, as we know, we've been dealing with internal insurgencies. That being said, I also hope that the administration, that is this presidency, would seize the opportunity to make use of this capacity that we have, because for some time now there have been serious pressures on this administration to change the what do you call them, the security for I mean the security leadership,
Yeah.
as regards results that we're getting from the insecurity that we've been facing, or in a way try to expand the how do I call it, the table of ideas, because we can't keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. Here we have officers that have gone through the ranks and are being promoted.
Mhm.
Please give them the opportunity to deliver their expertise so that we can get better results in this country.
Yes.
The Nigerian military historically has been known to be competent, especially within the areas that it pursues, especially within the continent, and even in international areas where they have joined others. But what we're seeing today doesn't give us much hope. So if we can promote these people, please give them that room to be able to bring fresh breath into the security operation within the country.
Thank you very much. We'll go here from here. He says, Val, I beg you, do not ever interrupt before he's echoed again. He says, I know the effort I made to hear him this morning.
Oh my.
Ugo, I apologize. He said, Echo 27,000
Yes.
wage. Sorry now. We have this messaging from Bamidele. It says 27,000 naira does not make sense since senators earn too much. And thank you very much. That's an ongoing conversation as well. Benga Komu sent in this message. It's a rather lengthy one, so I'll take some parts. It says the governors have been reckless with funds received and have no excuse not to pay. How can some people earn 31 million in a month? And we're arguing over 30,000 naira. It's ironic that this money is from the same federal purse. How is this defensible? Let's move on.
Alright, moving on to the story I read earlier on. Police commissioners to be swapped during election, and that's from the Vanguard. Now, the Police Service Commission, PSC, has confirmed that commissioners of police across the state will be swapped for the purposes of next month's general elections. Now, the commission said the swing over would not be automatic transfers or redeployment, but a change of guard methods to ensure efficient policing for the elections. Adedumade, what's your take?
I've been having this debate within myself if this is actually a good move or if it's not. Now, some of the arguments I've thought of is this. One, with regard to community policing, we always advise or we always recommend that officers who are familiar with the communities are the ones that police these communities. And that is what has been happening. That is not what has been happening, but that is what we hope will be happening even when state police is created. However, now that there is a swap of these police commissioners during this period, I know the general idea is to prevent bias by virtue of these people who may have been set in their ways in the particular state that they may be. But I'm thinking,
Or influence from their government.
yes, or influence from their governors. Exactly what I'm thinking. I think I'll still choose the community policing route because when a new commissioner for police comes for 2 or 3 weeks, really does he actually know the community? Does he really know the hotspots, or is he just there to just carry out the functions on paper for those 2 or 3 weeks? And now, when he knows he is leaving after 2 or 3 weeks, does that put in him a sense of duty to that community? These are reasons I don't feel this swap is actually good. But that being aside, it's actually good to know that the police is being monitored, at least by the PSC during this period of elections. The police is going to be providing about 80% of security during these elections, and they are trying to put so many things in place to ensure that there is proper professionalism on the side of the police. For instance, they've insisted that they all wear uniforms while on duty. They've provided hotlines people can call. And I'm also interested in the role SARS will be playing, because we know that SARS has recently been put under the control of the
That was a
commissioners
big
of police.
story yesterday.
Yes, and I'm wondering, okay, these guys are not known for ethics. These guys are not known for human rights protection, but actually human rights violations. So I'm wondering, what role will they be playing in this election? I know they're going to be deployed. I know they're going to be used strategically by these police commissioners, but I wonder. Now, there's also another part of the story that talks about employment of the police and how the police is understaffed. We've known that for so long, and there is this plan to recruit 30,000 policemen every year for the next few years. But I don't even think that's going to be enough. Truthfully, we have to start state police, because if we employ 30,000 federal police, then we now employ another 30,000 state police in each state every year, then hey, we're definitely going to get some good policing skills.
A point to examine. You raised two things, two almost contradicting points, but they're not contradicting yourself in your statements, but things that you need to pay attention to. And I'll ask you as a question. So the first point you raised spoke to their understanding of their terrain if they're deployed to a new zone, right? And then the second point you raised was making sure that the police being deployed at this time, very close to the elections. Don't you think that might be the reason why there is a bit of a reshuffle at this time leading to the election, so that they can dispel the familiarity, so to speak, for lack of a better word, with the sitting governors at the time?
Exactly. That's why I said the issue of bias.
Mm.
But if we put that aside and we look at professionalism, I will go with the police officer who knows the terrain and being able to manage that terrain perfectly well. Unlike someone who is calm, who is fresh, who doesn't know much of the terrain, might probably not even be able to speak the language, and will be expected to adequately police that terrain during this period.
Just to add to that, because at the end of the day, their duty is to protect lives and property. You mentioned professionalism. If you're being trained, do you have to know the terrain to be able to operate your basic function? At the end of the day, you're trained, you're fully trained. Hopefully the policemen are trained. Should
Actually,
it matter?
the knowledge of the terrain is part of the training, and I think you cannot take them separately. Yeah, they go together.
All right, okay, moving away from that story, we'll go on to one from the Punch, which states reps pass bill criminalizing estimated billing. I see you smiling, Golan, but let me just quickly give a brief before we talk about this. A bill seeking to amend the Electric Power Reform Act prohibits and criminalize estimated billing of consumers passed the third reading at the House of Representatives yesterday. This was sponsored by the Majority Leader, Mr. Femi Bajabiamila.
Yes, elections are on the way. Our politicians are working for the people.
Same to be.
This is in the interest of the people.
people.
I mean, when we look at it, of course, it makes a lot of sense. Anyway, there's been a lot of back and forth also between the government and also at least the House of Reps members and also the distribution companies in Nigeria, who have actually said that if this if they begin to criminalize estimated billing, that there would be a lot of consequences for it. There'll be a lot of problems for it. Anyway, when we look at the story, anyway, it says it's actually past its third hearing. It's not a law yet until it passes through Senate as well too. So it still has to go through Senate. But it makes a lot of sense because we've been having a lot of issues and a lot of people complaining heavily as well to that. You get a lot of estimated billings. You find out that people living in a one-bedroom apartment also paying outrageous sums of money. And so government has to look into this issue as well too, because when we're talking about it, of course, in recent times anyway, I know the current minister of power, that's Fashola, is actually commissioned a lot more local prepaid meters now, providers now. So we should expect that we would see a lot more metering of houses also, so that we can put an end to this estimated billion. It's extortion.
All right. Dami from Ikeja says the Air Force did not promote officers, the Air Force simply transferred personnel around. Thank you very much, Dami, for that. Bengals says, for me, the most important thing is for us to have a progressive infrastructural development in the country. Dubai had a progressive and consistent infrastructural development for 15 years, and the city became an attraction for tourists and investors from a desert city it used to be. I just hope that we adopt this progressive and consistent method for infrastructural development in this country. And we move on.
Okay, so our next story comes from the New Telegraph. This one comes to you at HMAG. It says low sugar production threatens 200,000 jobs. And the story says moves by the federal government to create 117,181 jobs under the sugar development plans between 2019 and 2022 seem to have crumbled due to low sugar production in the country. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, the most interesting part of that story for me was actually the Dangote refinery, the Dangote sugar refinery part, because I was thinking, after seeing all the problems, and I thought to myself, hey, Mr. Dangote again to the rescue. Now, sugar is a big deal in Nigeria. We, for the past 20, sorry, not 20, but for the past 5 years, our sugar intake has increased gradually. For instance, in 2012, we took about 1.1 million metric tons. In 2015, 1.50, 1.50. In 2016, 1.56, and in 2017, 1.6 million metric tons. So definitely in 2018, we'll have taken more than that, and in 2019, we will definitely be taking more than that. It's very interesting that Nigeria launched an initiative to produce more sugar in 2012, but it has not really been successful, more majorly because of policy effectiveness. The government has not been able to effectively, shall I say, implement the policies that it planned in 2012, and we're still at the stalemate. Now, we import most of our sugar from Brazil till now, and we have states that are supposed to be creating, or sorry, to be farming sugar, but because of the insecurity, we're still having problems there as well. So what I would just say in a nutshell is, can we just get something done with this sugar thing? Because it's taking so long, and it's, that's why when we look at this story, it seems like we never get things done. We just talk and talk and talk.
All right, thank you very much for that one. Let's quickly rush into our next story. This one here from the Punch newspaper says CBN cautions federal government against rising debt level, and this comes to you, Paula.
Well, this is the conversations that we have been having for a few years now. The IMF has raised the alarm. Now the CBN governor is also raising the alarm as well too, because our debt stock is suddenly rising astronomically over the years. Our current debt stock is about $73 billion or so is what we're currently owing. And of course, the reason why the CBN governor is raising this alarm is that we know the issues that we have when it comes to debt as well. Repayment is an issue, and of course we know that currently at the moment we're paying about 50 to 60% of our revenue is actually going towards debt repayment or so. So when we have that issue, we have to look at how are we going to fund our budget, are we going to fund infrastructure or so. The only way we could do that if we're paying so much to service our debt is to continue to borrow. So of course the CBN governor is raising so much alarm that the government should look into this heavily. A lot of people have been talking about it. We're really worried about it. What's the federal government doing about it? All they've been doing is trying to substitute the local debt for international debt. We need to look into it. It's very critical for the sake of the future generation.
Thank you very much for that one. Real quick, our last story here comes from this day newspaper. It comes to you where it says ATN TTI to launch driver's training certification. This I'm actually very, very interested in.
Yeah, it's a good initiative. They intend to use some kind of private-public partnership to train commercial drivers, especially the truck ones. However, the usual challenge, they didn't speak about the cost, the usual challenge is not the training, it's the enforcement. So we're hoping that they also have a plan to enforce optimization, to enforce implementation, because the driving record of most Nigerians. Most times, however we get our driver's license, at the end of the day, it's how well the enforcement of the license that determines the sanity on our roads.
Thank
Right.
you. A quick message here from Yinka on WhatsApp. It says, in December, Ikeda Electric gave me a crazy bill. We complained. Guess what? They cut off an entire area of the supply because it to be specific.
We won't complain again.
The tactics the discos use now is to bully the customers into paying any rubbish they bring. Yinka, we know it's not funny and it's problematic. Now, Max Azori says, good morning. Please, commentator on power. Should they carry out more extensive research on the topic of the federal government's lack of policy implementation promised has bankrupted all the discos. Observe the Yola disco as an instance. I have a few messages on Twitter. Let's see if we can squeeze in one or two here. Steve Obiako says, minimum wage would be less an issue if basic amenities are in place, free healthcare, good roads, effective transport system, quality free education, etc. If not, even 100,000 naira minimum wage, we can't afford much, basically. Thank you very much, and special thanks to our analysts for stepping in this morning. That Mr. G Quest is Bolahon. Thank you very much for coming in. And Devo Okore, thank you. You can find him on Twitter at Devo, as at Devo, and of course, Adilmade is by the same name.
Have a great day, Lagos.
Lagos, coming up next, we talk sports inside of the locker room. This is Smooth Night 8.1.